After 30 years of negotiating with Russian government, with the timber production, with UNESCO team, our territory of my people, which called Bikini area, have been recognized and granted the UNESCO World Heritage status 5 years ago. So, which was of course a great victory for us, and that is a very successful story. It's not inclusive, maybe it's rather exclusive, but that is a great case and example how indigenous peoples themselves joined with government, with environment organization, and with UNESCO can reach consensus to protect the big massive of untouched forest.
Aloha and welcome to Cooper Union, what's happening with human rights around the world. And today I'm very fortunate to be joined by Rodion, who's the director of CSIPN. He's an indigenous activist and a human rights defender from Russian Siberia. Today, we'll be looking at World Heritage Sites, and these are landmarks and areas with legal protection under an international treaty administered by UNESCO. And these are important areas for having cultural, historical, or scientific significance. And what is significant about them is they're judged to contain cultural and natural heritage around the world considered to be the outstanding value to humanity. And as of July 2026, there are 1,273 of these protected sites around 173 countries, and they're all featured on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And we're so excited to have Rodion share with us his experience because he's one of the rare people who's active at home in his community with the World Heritage Site, but also someone who's attended the UNESCO World Heritage Committee that meets. And they just wrapped up its 48th session in Busan in the Republic of Korea in July last month. And they just added 25 new spaces to the World Heritage List. So Rodion, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, it's great. Thanks for inviting me. And it's a long story. But even more than 30 years of my engagement. But to be very brief, we are living in a very rich territory in terms of biodiversity. But on the other hand, we have been fighting for 30 years for our forest because of big timber production. And of course, since that time, we're looking at the UNESCO Convention on the World Heritage as one of our high-level destination in terms of conservation protection and also to protect our forest. So it means it's quite personal story to be engaged, but also it's a quite global story, reflecting how indigenous peoples collectively can maximize joint efforts at the global level to protect their own territories, which is still very rich in terms of biodiversity. So, and after 30 years of negotiating with Russian government, with the timber production, with UNESCO team, our territory of my people, which called Bikini area, have been recognized and granted the UNESCO World Heritage status 5 years ago. So, which is of course a great victory for us, and that is a very successful story. It's not inclusive, maybe it's rather exclusive, but that is a great case and example how indigenous peoples themselves, jointly with government, with environment organization, and with UNESCO, can reach consensus to protect the big massive of untouched forest. But also, since last year, I'm a co-chair of the International Indigenous People Forum on the World Heritage. It's a collective self-governance body of indigenous peoples representing all 7 social cultural regions from Pacific to Latin America and from Africa to the Arctic. So again, to promote and to protect indigenous peoples' rights within the World Heritage Convention implementation, because we are still facing with a lot of violation of human rights of indigenous peoples under the World Heritage sites in some part of the world, including Latin America and in Africa in particular. So it's a very complicated process. It's a very technical process, but that was my main mandate to go to Busan, Republic of Korea, the hosting country of the 48th session of the World Heritage Committee, consisting of member states. We are working as an observer, but of course, we are working on behalf of the global indigenous peoples movement and the World Heritage Committee and all the member states. They approach us as a self-governance and indigenous-led caucus and institutions, which provide us also collective mandate to make statement, to be part of discussion. And maybe finally, I would like to acknowledge that this session was very specific because the committee approved the roadmap how to increase the indigenous people's participation under the World Heritage implementation at the ground. That is, I think, one of the main outcomes of the session in Busan this year. But again, it's a long road for implementation, and we should increase and maximize our efforts, work together with the UNESCO World Heritage Center, World Heritage Committee, member states, with advisory bodies, including IUCN, ICOMOS, and others, technical teams, in order to ensure that the roadmap implementation will move in a better way. And also, of course, with a strong and effective participation of indigenous peoples from all 7 regions. So I will stop now for any
Rodion, thank you.
Clarification.
Thank you, Rodion. And that really is why we wanted to feature you, because you have that unique perspective of going through the UNESCO World Heritage List process for your people in your specific sacred space in Siberia, Russia, but then also in the larger institution of how indigenous peoples can then continue to participate in these UNESCO to also guarantee their sacred lands to be protected and recognized as a universal value. Rodion, could you go back and share a bit when you first got the idea and why you thought it might be good to organize in Russia to be UNESCO World Heritage Site? And share a bit about the beauty of your homeland.
Yes, it's a great question. Of course, I think as many of indigenous peoples, my community is called UDG. It's a small tribe with a total population of around 500 only, but we are still keeping our traditional lifestyle and keeping our forest and keeping our hunting, fishing, non-timber products, gathering. So which is great. But again, because of the great commercial interest, we have to fight all our life with illegal logging, with the commercial logging, with overfishing, with under control tourism, and many other stuff. So and finally, we came to agreement within the community to start a campaign, and we created a strong alliances with environmental organizations, including Greenpeace, WWF, with academic institutions, because it's very technical aspect also to provide a lot of materials, documents related to justification in terms of biodiversity, richness, and many other stuff. And again, it took not 1, 2, 3 years. It took a decade, and because it's a long procedure. We hosted several missions from UNESCO team, including IUCN staff and many others. And we are also so lucky because we are living together with Amur tiger, one of the biggest wild cat in the world. And also there are a lot of other species of flora and fauna recognized by international and Russian Red Book, including birds, fishes, trees, and many others. And based on the UNESCO and IUCN expertise, our territory and Bikin River Valley recognized as a Russian Amazon, particularly in terms of biodiversity. So that was some kind of background. And the second level is our cultural heritage, because we are living together with our nature, with our forest, and keeping our own cultural values based on the traditional activity. So it's a combination of keeping our forest, but also keeping our own culture. Unfortunately, we cannot achieve our final goal because our proposal was to have a status of mixed World Heritage, including natural and cultural. But it was very complicated and technical procedure, and but finally we agreed and accept to have status of only natural World Heritage site, and we are happy because that is also top level of conservation status. And one more, and maybe the most important issue, why we can achieve, because we are trying to promote a co-management approach, which means that formally, yes, this territory belongs to the Russian government, but based on the co-management, we as indigenous peoples, we are part of the management team of the national park. We have created a permanent council of the national park, and the chair of the permanent council is the deputy director of national park in charge of indigenous peoples and traditional activity. We can manage to host the headquarters of national park in our community, not at the regional capitals or in Moscow, at the ground level. And finally, we can keep around 80% of the whole territory of national park dedicated to traditional activity, including free access to fishing, to hunting, and to non-timber products gathering. So so far, if we can evaluate and make a strong assessment together, jointly with Conservation Society, with Russian government, we are still keeping around 2 million hectares of pristine forest. We are still keeping our own home. And the national park also became a driver for the new development of the community in terms of social, cultural, and economic life. That is, I think, the best outcomes. And also, it's a very innovative approach in the current Russian situation. How partnership and cooperation between different right holders and stakeholders provide a very strong result. So, of course, we are monitoring situation, and because the key issue, we should look at the future in terms of more sustainable way, how to manage, and also how to make some kind of profit for local development. But for us, it's basically like a issue of planning, because we have a strong basis to move forward together. And for me, that is provide a quite positive, a good case under the whole UNESCO Convention implementation at the ground. But again, I have to say this: it's not inclusive case; it is exclusive case. That's why our main focus today, working at the global level, to protect the violation. I mean, to avoid violation of human rights of indigenous peoples under the sacred sites, under the World Heritage Sites, particular in some specific regions like Africa. In the case of Ngorongoro, it's still very challenging, in some other cases in other part of the world. So it's a very interesting, it's a very challenging, but that is our main mandate: how to work at the global level based on the ground situation.
Rodion, thank you so much for sharing about the process. Can you provide some insights on how coming together to apply for UNESCO World Heritage status and now managing the UNESCO World Heritage site has actually contributed to greater coordination and positive coming together of your community to advance indigenous rights?
Yes, but again, it's a very long process and very technical procedure, which means you have to have a full understanding whom and how you would like to cooperate on the long journey. So that's why from the very beginning, we started to create the strong alliances between indigenous peoples and their institutions, our community, with academic society, because you need a very strong records from academia in terms of database of your biodiversity, in terms of specific red book of flora and fauna, and many other things. The second level of negotiation and cooperation, of course, it's Russian officials, including regional government and federal government, Ministry of, for instance, Natural Resources, and of course, advisory bodies of UNESCO, like IUCN, provide the technical expertise and field mission to make a overall assessment of the environmental situation, biodiversity, and also governance of indigenous peoples, and many other stuff. So it took, I think, 20 years in totally to make such kind of negotiation and partnership. But also you have to know who are your opposition, which is of course also had their own resources to promote themselves, like a timber business or production. So that time we had a big campaign jointly with Greenpeace and WWF to make our case visible. So to overcome the situation, and also some commercial proposals. Yeah, but again, it works when you have a very strong coordination and partnership, and of course strong support from your domestic government. And also you should have access to the cabinet, to the corridors of UNESCO and of government, trying to lobby and trying to be more visible and trying to negotiate. And of course, finally, you have to be very well self-organized at the community level. You should have a strong leadership, because there are so many issues around. If you have a strong community leadership and also institution to speak on behalf of your community, of your people and nation, it's also provide additional bonus to keep your very clear mandate and role. Because it is a very huge territory. National Park Bikin, in our traditional territory, is one of the biggest conservation zone in the Russian Federation, with only 500 population. So that is also a great responsibility, how to keep the World Heritage Site. So, but again, it's a daily working, it's a daily commitment. It's very interesting working. It's a very multi-level working. But again, it's a good case, because we as indigenous peoples living in different parts of the world, under different political regimes and conservation regimes, different social, cultural conditions, we have to create a key principles, vision, universal to all of us, based on our own values. Because, for instance, if we look at the outstanding universal values recognized by UNESCO, which is very complicated, which is very technical, and in many cases it doesn't reflect the cultural values of indigenous peoples. That is also one of the main challenges, how to work together. Because if we have a lot of numbers of so-called universal values, without strong reflection of cultural values of indigenous peoples, it doesn't work at all. And that is one of the key issue and key mandate of our International Indigenous People Forum of the World Heritage, to promote our own cultural values and how they should be incorporated into our outstanding universal value. And also we have to acknowledge that most of the World Heritage site in our territories recognized as a natural sites, not cultural sites. That is also big challenge for us, how to protect and to promote our own cultural values. And this is very strange contradiction when we are still keeping our own lands based on our centuries knowledge and experience and traditional knowledge, how to respect nature, forest, waters. But at the same time, UNESCO doesn't want to recognize our cultural status only as a world natural status. That is also one big gap we should overcome. But again, the convention itself is very technical. That's why UNESCO has its own advisory bodies focusing on environment assessment, on cultural assessment, on mix assessment. And we also need a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge to deal with such kind of very technical language. So that's the issue of capacity building, and that is our maybe one of the key role and mandate to increase our own expertise, knowledge. And for the first time this year, we launch a global training for indigenous peoples, focusing on the UNESCO World Heritage Convention. And we made a strong progress and successful training with more than 200 delegates and participants. But the other challenge is lack of funding. In compare with other forums like climate change and CBD, the World Heritage Forum is quite small. For instance, in Busan, we managed to bring only around 30 and 35 indigenous delegates. So it's very small. But again, that is also issue of access to funding. And we also can acknowledge that the voluntary fund of United Nations started also to provide travel support to indigenous grantees. And this year was the second time when the voluntary fund provided travel support to indigenous fellows to come to Busan. It's also very strong progress, but it's not enough. So it means there are still some challenges we are facing with, but if we have our strong role, mandate, and understanding where and how we would like to move together, that is a basic line for success story in the future. And it's already done. Institutionally, so far we are having very strong steering committee of the forum consisting of 7 regional representatives. And now we are having an official decision, including roadmap for increasing indigenous people participation. And we have started to build a strong vision and cooperation with UNESCO World Heritage Center and with advisory bodies. And finally, in September, under the Human Rights Council session, for the first time, the Human Rights Council decided to have a high-level panel on the World Heritage and indigenous peoples' engagement. It is very strong politically and strategically to bring this issue to the Human Rights Council. So again, that is our strategy and our vision, how we can work together at the global level as an international indigenous people forum on the World Heritage.
Rodion, thank you for the deep insight, because the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO, and the World Heritage List, as you said, can be complex. But on the other hand, it's really important to see how you, as indigenous peoples in Siberia and Russia and under that regime, could still be able to navigate this international institution of UNESCO and World Heritage Committee to make sure that you could organize at the UNESCO World Heritage Committee and ensure indigenous peoples could influence that process. And looking at it here from Hawaii, we're looking at Moku'ula and Maui. We're also looking at Pu'ukukui watershed, at various examples of spaces that are sacred here in Hawaii. And we look to you because you've already been able to go through this international institution and then be able to make sure that it works for you. And we appreciate you even noting the natural heritage site and then the cultural, and to see how one can ensure the best designation to then protect that land for now and for future generations. Can you maybe, in conclusion, share a bit about that upcoming UN Human Rights Council session, and also maybe some other great examples of Indigenous peoples who have also been able to have World Cultural Heritage sites that were similar to the amazing work that you've done in Siberia, Russia?
I strongly believe that a UNESCO Convention on the World Heritage is one of the prominent international document and international law to protect both natural and house and cultural heritage for the next generation. And also it provides some kind of opportunity for us as indigenous peoples, because we are at the top of this whole ecosystem, and we are still keeping a lot of biodiversity, including our territory, waters, forest, and lands. But the only point how the right holders, how the national government and other stakeholders can create a common understanding of such kind of value and the purpose. And that is, I think, the main challenge in front of us. But if we can create our own governance system, our own vision based on our cultural values, and also to keep our land jointly with conservation society, jointly with national government, it can provide more opportunity for indigenous peoples to keep their territories, to keep their both natural and cultural heritage. But again, it's not so easy. It's we know how it could be working in a completely wrong way. So the only way we should invest to our education, to our generations, to our capacity building, and to our technical expertise. Because once again, it's a very multi-level, it's a very technical process and procedure. But I think the best way to be engaged from the beginning, not at the level of the decision-making procedure or at the level of already existing World Heritage Sites management. No, it should be done earlier at the level of negotiation, at the level of coordination, at the level of proposal as a potential World Heritage Site. So that's, I think, one of the key dynamics or key issue we would like to overcome and to change, particularly at the domestic level. And of course, the biggest issue also our global coordination, how we could work collectively, not individually representing our own community, but collectively as a global movement of indigenous peoples, which is also not so easy because we are having different kind of experience and knowledge. But again, that is the only way to be successful, if we can create a common understanding and common values at the global level. But again, we made a lot in terms of institutional development, in terms of creating a strong alliances and partnership with the UNESCO team, with the World Heritage Center. And I do believe that we will increase because of this very historic decision made last year in Paris to create a roadmap on enhancing participation of indigenous peoples, and recently in Busan to develop concrete roadmap activities and plan for the enhancing participation of indigenous people. So that is a good starting point, and we are at the beginning of the long journey. And of course, we need more coordination, more communication.
Mahalo, Rodion, for sharing, because what is so valuable is you talk about United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, World Heritage List, from a specific experience of you representing the collective rights of the indigenous peoples of Siberia in Russia. That's so crucial. But then you're also understanding of the Convention concerning the protection of world cultural and natural heritage, because this document was adopted by UNESCO in 1972 and then entered, of course, into effect in 1975 after being ratified by 20 countries. But it does provide that framework for international cooperation in preserving and protecting cultural treasures and natural areas throughout the world. But then the level of expertise you have of participating in this UNESCO World Heritage Committee that just concluded in Busan, Korea, is absolutely crucial for other indigenous peoples as they want to follow in the path of what you've been able to accomplish for your indigenous peoples. And we thank you for, in a way, lighting and illuminating this international institution as a space for indigenous peoples to come to defend their lands. And we thank you so much for that work, but also then bringing the issues together from UNESCO to the UN Human Rights Council. And we look forward to hearing about that upcoming meeting in September at the 63rd session. But thank you again from Hawaii. It is an inspiration to see how you've been able to organize even inside Russia, and how this could be a powerful transformative tool to defend sacred lands here in Hawaii going forward into the future, and for other indigenous peoples, as you shared, throughout the 7 cultural, socioeconomic regions.
Yes, Dosha, thank you very much. It's encouraging and motivated me more, because on the one hand, all of us as a human being, we are so committed to keep our heritage, right? Including natural and cultural one. But the mechanism and the way is still very complicated. And next year we will celebrate 20 years of the anniversary of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But only last years we can urge UNESCO, and we can bring a human rights-based approach to UNESCO. That is also one of the challenging, including many United Nations thematic agencies or secretariat. So, but again, we should think positively and should work together.
Thank you again, Rodion, for your humility, but also your dedication to the promotion and protection of indigenous people's rights. And we look forward to meeting you at future sessions and seeing how more indigenous peoples can follow the path of what you were able to accomplish at UNESCO. Mahalo.